Hey everyone, welcome back to the Goody Reader Radio Show. My name is Michael, and of course, I'm joined by Jeremy Greenfield of Digital Book World today. How are you?
Good. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing quite well. So, DBW happened. What are your memories of such event?
Well, this is my third Digital Book World, and I think this was the best one yet. I've said that every single time, but I haven't been lying any of those times. My favorite memories, all the stuff on Amazon was really fascinating. Brad Stone, who wrote the Everything Store, and Joe Esposito. I loved Jim Cramer's presentation for Mad Money. He talked for about half an hour about all the different companies involved in book publishing and if they were good investments or not. And he was just extremely entertaining and a good break from some of the heavier stuff in the day. And maybe my favorite moment was the Digital Book Awards with LeVar Burton. He was awesome and he was really entertaining, and the awards were great. And a lot of senior level executives from publishing companies showed up to accept the awards and gave really thoughtful thank you speeches. A lot goes into making a really good enhanced ebook or app or transmedia experience, and these people showed up, and I just thought it was a great program. So overall, it was really exciting. At Digital Book World, we created, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 articles about all the different news items that happened at the conference. There were funding announcements, and there were senior executives getting into it on stage with each other. And we're actually putting together a PDF for all the attendees. They're going to get this free PDF download of everything we did at the conference with images and a lot of fun stuff there. So it was a great Digital Book World. I'm exhausted, but I'm sort of already looking forward to next year.
That's usually how it is. You have so much fun that it's like, okay, how are we going to beat this next year? How are we going to, make it bigger? How are we going to get, how are we going to like make it better than the year prior? And that's in itself is always a challenge.
Totally.
All right, cool. So it sounds like it was a lot of fun, and we covered it extensively with one of our writers that were there. So, DBW, I'm glad that it met your it seems like everybody really enjoyed it there. There was a lot of people there, and there was a lot of insightful talks and things like that. I've been actually watching a bit of Kramer lately. I kind of fell out of it watching it for a while, but it seems as though whenever I'm actually watching him rant and rave, he's usually always talking about Barnes and Noble these days.
Yeah, he seems a little bullish on Barnes and Noble. Here's the deal. He thinks that Nook, the digital division, is an albatross, and the sooner that Barnes and Noble's rid of Nook, the better. And that there is an opportunity for Barnes and Noble to be a really good thing to own, as other bookstores fall by the wayside. I'm not sure that he's aware of exactly what's happening this minute in the bookstore world, where a lot of indie bookstores are sort of coming back. But I think maybe the slowdown in the growth of ebooks makes somebody like him think, hey, there's going to be a place for a Barnes and Noble in 10 years. And if that's the case, Barnes and Noble is in a really good position to be that company. So I think he sees in the next year what the rest of us sort of see is Nook is either going to get sold or carved off or will go away. And Barnes and Noble will once again resume being able to book some pretty healthy profits. Because even though Nook loses, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, Barnes and Noble has still been a profitable company throughout all of this. So imagine how much more profitable it would be if it wasn't losing all that money.
Yeah, I mean, their bookstore and their college bookstores do really well. And, sure, you hear about the odd store closing here and there, but, for every few stores that close, a new one opens. So it's, yeah, I see Barnes and Noble as their core book selling business is extremely profitable. And, I'm sure everyone's well familiar with sort of the cumulative losses and the executive flip flopping, and a lot of senior executives at the company have been leaving lately, like Jim Hilt, which I'm sure who you're familiar with. He was sort of one of the architects of the ebook division at Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, the company has lost several senior level executives over the past 6 or 7 months. I mean, first of all, William Lynch, who was really he was the CEO of Barnes and Noble until the summer, and he was really the champion for Nook. He sort of led the charge on Nook. He basically brought that company from nowhere to somewhere, and he got the axe. And then he was replaced by Michael Husby, who was also sort of running Nook, and now he's CEO. And now that he's CEO, you see Jim Hilt is left, Bill Saperstein is left, several other very key Nook ebook technology and software folks have left. Really, all three phases of that business have seen senior level executives depart, and it could be for a number of reasons. It could be that they weren't Hoospie's guys, and once Hoospie got in over the summer, the process began of trying to get them out, push them out, replace them, etc. It could be that the continued poor results are finally taking their toll, and these executives are finally getting the comeuppance for the poor performance. It could be coincidence that these three guys all happen to just leave at once. It could be that they're smelling something in the company that isn't going to go so well. They're seeing what a lot of us on the outside are seeing, that the prospects aren't so bright, and they're looking for newer and better horizons and greener pastures. So it's not necessarily that these executives are leaving the company because the company is somewhat in turmoil. Although in my experience reporting on companies and people moves, that's probably what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when new management comes in, you always bring in your own guys to,
Usually that's how it works. Yeah.
yeah. So you present some very interesting perspectives on that. It could be a lot. It could be a myriad of factors. We just don't know. But I wonder, with Saperstein and with Hilt, what do you think they're going to do next? Because they, pretty well the world's their oyster right now. They just have so much experience with starting an ebook and starting a hardware division from scratch and getting it on into a retail environment. Nook, up until recently, they did kind of well for themselves, especially like when they first got onto the scene with the Nook Color and their Nook e-readers. They did well. They sold well, and it was extremely profitable. And then it kind of cumulatively saw losses. But what do you think is going to be next for these guys? Because they have a lot of experience.
Yeah, there are companies out there that probably would be happy to have some of that experience on their side. I'm thinking of Samsung in particular, which has seemed to want to make a more aggressive push for the ebook business in the U.S. And among the very large technology companies going after that, probably has the least experience in that arena. Google's been doing it for a long time and has a fully staffed team. Kobo seems to have a strategy that's working for it internationally, and Hilt and Saperstein don't really have any international experience, or very, very little. I think Sony has been plodding along forever. Really was the OG of the ebook game in the U.S. and just hasn't really done anything since that. So I don't think Sony would be a good place to go. I mean, but the main answer is I don't know. It's not like these guys are coming off a successful IPO or a successful startup exit. I mean, they're leaving a little bit in shame, probably. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be highly coveted executives. You're right; they have a ton of experience. But I wouldn't be surprised to see one of them end up at Samsung, particularly Jim Hilt, because Samsung doesn't probably need much help on the hardware side.
Yeah, I mean, I've been paying attention to a lot of news lately, and Jeff Bezos, he owns a newspaper now. He's always looking for talent. You have Vox Media that's shifting things around. You have Facebook launching their own dedicated news app soon. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are branching off into news and to reading type of things, and there's a lot of startups now that are launching, and I don't think that those guys won't be out of a job for very long if they have the inclination to jump right into something right away, as opposed to maybe relaxing after many years of turmoil.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I think they probably worked very, very, very hard. I mean, the senior level executives at companies like this that are in pitch business battles, I mean, their life is their work a lot of times. You rarely see these guys have much of a work-life balance, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they take time off. I mean, the company isn't competing with Amazon the way that it used to, but it's still a very large company that had a lot of success selling ebooks and selling devices. And that doesn't come overnight. They worked very hard for that, even though the company isn't winning the battle right now. The accomplishment is nothing really to sniff at. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took time off. If I were them, I probably would do the same.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we have some news items you wanted to talk about today. One of them is the loyalty that a lot of ebook buyers feel towards a specific company or a specific ecosystem?
Yeah, I was at Digital Book World talking to a lot of senior level executives at the big ebook retailers, and it really raised the question to me, how loyal are their customers? They're in these massive price battles, right? And they're lowering the prices of books like The Goldfinch to under $2. Um, books that would, if you wanted to get 10 years ago, would have been a $35 hardcover or nothing.
Yeah.
And it's really just a crazy situation out there with the pricing and the competition. And I'm wondering, what is this doing? So I went to the Codex Group, Peter Hildick Smith. The Codex Group surveys thousands of readers and ebook readers across the U.S. every month about how they buy things and what they do and how they make purchasing decisions, how they discover new books, and asked him to look at his data and see if he could answer this question for me. And he absolutely had the data. So 86%, that's roughly 7 out of 8 people who buy ebooks buy from only one retailer. So if you are an ebook buyer, there is a very high chance that you only buy from Amazon, or you only buy from Nook, or you only buy from Apple. And in fact, those 3 retailers that I just mentioned are the 3 main ones that make up the bulk of that 86%. Now, when you look at the rest of the ebook buyers, that 1 out of 8, that person is more likely to be someone who buys from some of the smaller retailers. The bulk of, say, Sony's customers or Kobo's customers in the U.S. are made up of people who float between retailers. And no surprise here, the number one place where they get that 14% gets its books, Amazon. So when it comes to this price competition and sort of attracting those buyers from other retailers, it looks like Amazon is doing the best job. And when it comes to building new audiences, if you're not Amazon, Apple, or Nook, it's an uphill battle, big time, because people are very, very loyal to those 3 companies in particular. So I think for ebook retailers, the message is, if I'm them, the price competition, it may not be worth it. They might be better focused on just continuing to retain their core customers by doing things like giving them very good service, giving them very good selection, and every time they price the Goldfinch for a couple of dollars, they're losing millions of dollars on that. It may not be worth it because they may not be acquiring many new customers.
So this poll, or when they talk to consumers every month, is this mainly just U.S. customers, or are they varied in different countries?
This is U.S. customers. So this is U.S. ebook readers, and I think that's a really good question because in other countries the market share spread is very different, and the market itself is very different. We are in a very mature ebook market in the U.S., the most mature ebook market. In places like the U.K. and Canada, it's also very mature, but still different. But then when you go, farther afield to other, say, New Zealand and Australia, or Germany and France, these are different markets that are going to have different profiles.
Yeah, I know in Canada, I track the market pretty, living here. I track it, and it looks like you have Kobo, you have Amazon, and then you have Sony, and Sony cumulatively declining in terms of the amount of people that are reading the book. It seems like every quarter they're moving down at least a percentage point or 2, and I think that just it's a retail visibility. Any bookstore in Canada, you can buy a Kobo device, but you can't buy a Kindle device. You can only buy Kindle devices at places like, former Radio Shack, now The Source. Mainly electronic shops is where you're going to find Kindles, whereas bookstores, that's where you're going to find Kobos, which is the bulk of the people that actually make the buying decisions when they're in a bookstore and they're, hey, what's this? And they check it out. And now in most Indigo stores, especially Chapter stores, they all have tech zones now where they sell iPads, iPad minis, and things like that. So I could really see Apple's market share in books in Canada slowly on the upwards trend, but it's still fairly negligible in people buying from them on a very sort of a loyalty basis. So it's a given that people are loyal to a specific ebook system, and then you sort of have those mercenary types that will, they're the types of people that would have bought from Fiction Wise, and
Hmm.
maybe they'll subscribe to Oyster or something like that, or maybe they'll just like float around and get the best deals possible. What do you think if you're a loyal Nook customer? What do you think companies like Sony or Apple or Amazon, at, what do they have to do to sort of get those customers? If you're is it in those companies' best interest to target those loyal customers and bring them over to their ebook ecosystem?
I don't know the answer to that question. I wish I did. And
Huh.
as I was talking to some of these retail folks, we're talking about what they can do. And for the record, I didn't sit down with Amazon this time around. And they've got tricks up their sleeve, but they're at a loss, I think, to some degree of how to compete. I think a lot of these retailers see what Amazon is doing as predatory pricing. Predatory pricing is, of course, against the Sherman Antitrust Act, but it's extremely hard to prove. And furthermore, the Department of Justice seems to be very interested these days in cases where consumers are going to pay more. And predatory pricing is consumers are usually paying less. Um, so I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure there is a good answer to that question. What do
I,
you think?
I think that that's sort of the question that probably everybody's sort of asking on the executive level at all these companies. It's like, how do we increase our market share? How do we get more people buying from our ecosystems? Companies like Kobo, it's all about international expansion. The more foreign markets that they enter, the more bookstores and retailers they get selling their devices. Obviously, their user base increases exponentially. But if you look at, say, of course, you're in the U.S., I'm in Canada, so we tend to look at things in a North American spirit. It's hard because it seems as though that pricing is really the only factor that these companies employ. So if Sony has a big deal, Amazon algorithms automatically match it. Kobo algorithms are automatically match it. So I don't know if price alone is is the definitive be all end all factor in trying to make people switch to your ecosystem. I think it's more like you have to offer more compelling reasons. For instance, Amazon purchasing Goodreads. It's a compelling reason now to buy a Kindle because you could, click on the G icon and start talking to people that are of like-minded souls, or maybe discover new books in sort of a catch-all social media environment. It doesn't really look like companies like Barnes and Noble or Sony or iBooks or any of these other companies. They're not really doing anything other than competing in price, and I think that they really have to reevaluate the ease of use in their ecosystem, being able to buy, add multiple books to your shopping cart. I talked to Kobo about this at PepCom, and one thing that I asked them they hadn't really considered, which is like bundling books. So, if I want to buy 3 books of the Hunger Games, I have to check out each book at once. I can't, I can't add them all to the cart and buy them at once. I have to buy the first book, I have to buy the second book, and I have to buy the third book, which is 3 different checkout procedures. In a lot of cases with say with the Harry Potter series of books, or if you look at say the Lord of the Rings trilogy, seldom are these companies bundling these books together and offering like $1 off or $2 off. Instead, you have to buy them all one by one. And I thought that ebook bundling is would be a kind of a cool thing for these companies to do to compete, because you could offer a trilogy of books, or if there's 6 books in a series or 10 books in a series, like you look at the Wheel of Time series, I think they're at like 12 books. There's no way for you to buy all 12 books at once, and maybe save $1 or two, or just to make the purchasing easier and saying, I heard a lot about these books. Hey, I could buy all 12 at once and, I'm good to go. I would like to see more companies experimenting with ebook bundling, even if it's like just offering the ability to buy them all, in a one shot. Despite, a discount would be a bonus, but I think that bundling would be kind of a cool thing. And I haven't really seen a lot of companies do it. I've seen publishers offer the ability to buy the Hunger Games trilogy as a one shot, but on a ebook reselling level, these companies are not at all concerned with ebook bundling. Do you think that that would be a compelling sort of feature for customers?
Um, I think the answer to that's yes. And I can tell you from experience at F&W Media, which is, one of Amazon's the company's biggest customer, but it's also a competitor because F&W has a very large e-commerce business. And one of the things that F&W's had success doing is bundling things, not just ebooks with other ebooks, but ebooks with print books and other products. So F&W stores sell third-party products that help the enthusiasts and hobbyists entertain themselves and participate in their hobbies, and they sell content along with those things. So I think bundling and unique offerings is something that consumers really want. A community could be another thing that consumers might want to be a part of. Goodreads has obviously helped Amazon, has a ready-made book reading community that it now basically owns. But I think people like to be part of a community, and they want to be sort of taken care of as part of a community. And I think that, a lot of these other ebook retailers, the experience isn't as good as at Amazon. And if they're going to compete, in the long term, I think it needs to be as good or better. Amazon just has the best buying and reading experience. It's really, really, really easy for me to buy and read Kindle books very quickly. So yeah, bundling might be it, but I don't really know what the answer. I mean, Amazon just really has it all. There's Amazon Prime, there's the one-click purchasing, there's the extremely aggressive pricing. The devices are best in class, I would say. I mean, I don't read a lot on a tablet, and I think iPads are a million times better than anything else out there that I've seen. But the e-reading products and the apps, the e-reading apps, Amazon has a great e-reading app. So I think it's very much an uphill battle, but there are people much, much smarter than I am who are working on this problem, and I think they'll probably come up with something.
Yeah, and don't forget, which is segueing into the next thing I want to talk about, Amazon does audiobooks really well. They had purchased an extensive portfolio of AudioGo titles, which include Lord of the Rings. AudioGo, I believe, was a BBC audiobook division. They had sort of licensed and retained a little bit of ownership to a UK company, and they also had a presence in the US, but they, went bankrupt, and Audible ended up getting the licenses for the vast majority of the titles, and so the BBC is actually going to be able to make a little bit more money from the Audible type stuff. But audiobooks in general are starting to catch on. It's almost becoming $1 billion business in terms of global revenue. And Overdrive, who is pretty well one of the premier, if not the best company that libraries turn to for digital distribution strategies for both audiobooks, video, and ebooks, Overdrive announced that all of their audiobooks now are going to be DRM free. And they're going to go from a WMA format, which is sort of like a Microsoft encryption format, to just as the standard MP3. I think that, all in all, MP3 is really what a lot of publishers produce their audiobooks in. It's the most common, it's the most accessible format. Anybody could really play it. And so I think that the turnaround time from publishers issuing audiobooks to Overdrive being able to distribute them, I think you'll probably see, when a new book comes out, you'll probably immediately see the new audiobook come out, provided that the publisher is doing a simultaneous release, issuing the print book, issuing the ebook, and then, issuing the audiobook. What are your thoughts, Jeremy, on, audiobooks in general?
Well, it's a small but growing segment. Digital has been very good to audio overall, making it just much easier for people to buy and consume audiobooks. But it's a very, very small part of the business. I think where publishers and retailers may find sort of a new angle to success is in bundling. Bundling the audio and the ebook and maybe even the print book together. And really the only retailer that has the power to do this really well and quickly is Amazon. But other retailers probably could bundle the other kinds of digital content really well. And of course, the indie retail platform startups like Gumroad and Ganxi have been offering multiple file bundling, multiple file type bundling for a while now. So it is an interesting angle to look at when it comes to business, but I think it's marginal compared to the main part of the business, which is really selling ebook bestsellers, selling the big titles.
Yeah. One bit of news that I had talked about, uh, it happened sort of about the end of last week, is Adobe has changed the way that they encrypt EPUB and PDF files. They say that they're making it more concerned, and the primary reason why they're doing this is to curb ebook piracy, which is a growing problem in terms of you only have to really Google to find, one-click removal tools for Kindle books, for Sony books, for Nook books, for Kobo books. There's popular programs like Caliber that allow users to manage their device a little bit more effectively. There's plugins for that will just remove DRM on the fly. Digital rights management, if for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it's basically ebook encryption. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo all use their own. So Barnes & Noble and Kobo use the EPUB format, but they use something called Schema, which is their own sort of proprietary ebook encryption suite, which is why if you buy a Kobo book, it's not compatible with Nook e-readers, or if you buy a Kindle book, it's incompatible with every e-reader. So when I looked at this, I found out that Adobe's biggest customer for the stock DRM is Sony, and those companies that actually use the Adobe DRM only account for 4% of the global ebook market, so it's fairly paltry. This
Well, do
will
you think that the Adobe DRM sort of leads the way or sets an example for the other technologies that are used?
You know, I know a lot of, say, magazine publishers that use like the Adobe suite of publishing tools to incorporate metadata or to incorporate like analytics tracking code. I know a lot of people that use the Adobe suite. For ebooks, but mainly it's for metadata and for analytics. It's not because they're using the Adobe encryption. So I don't know how, you know, it's such a small percentage of people actually using this, like on a mainstream business level, that I don't really know how this will affect piracy, because piracy will always find a way.
Yeah, but it's an arms race, though. I mean, well, what are they supposed to do? Just give up?
No,
The
I
fact
hear
is
what you're
that
saying.
authors and publishers want it. Authors and publishers want it, and authors and publishers are a really important part of the publishing food chain. So, and agents as well. So as long as those guys want to try to do something to prevent people from indiscriminately sharing and copying files, there will be companies out there that are going to try to help them. So I think that you're right. Piracy will always find a way. But what's Adobe supposed to do? Just throw its hands up and say we give up? They're just going to keep on plugging away, and it'll be a cat and mouse game from here until ebooks are no longer a thing.
Well, I have a scoop. I talked to somebody at Adobe. I can't mention them by name because I don't want to get them into trouble. But apparently, what Adobe is experimenting at right now in their labs is always on digital rights management. So what they're trying to do is develop an unbreakable encryption system that will necessitate your tablet or smartphone or e-reader to always be online. So you'll always have to maintain an internet connection to verify that you own the book. It's sort of what Electronic Arts does with its Origin service, or there's a lot of game companies that if you want to play SimCity, you have to always be online and have an internet connection, and this way it verifies your key. It authorizes you that you have purchased this title, and it's supposed to make the whole process more secure. And to date, hardly anyone's been able to circumvent that. Do you think that there's that an always on encryption system for ebooks is the smart play for the future?
Well, I mean, as a reader, and also, not as technologically savvy as you and probably some of the other listeners, that sounds horrible to me. I read a tremendous amount in places where I don't have an internet connection. And in fact, I deliberately turn my internet connection off when I'm reading because I don't want to be bothered by text messages and things like that. So, because I read a lot on my phone. So that just sounds terrible to me. And I feel like, the thing with DRM is with everything that is about ebooks is that there's a balance between, what you as the publisher and author might want, which is nobody can steal our files no matter what, and what the readers want. And I think, for most readers, DRM is invisible. For most readers aren't trying to share and copy their files. They don't even know about what DRM is or that it exists. They just buy the book, they read the book, they buy the next one, they read the next one.
Right.
But if you make it so that one of these normal consumers, these normal readers who's just reading the book, and then all of a sudden their Wi-Fi goes down, and then all of a sudden the book disappears, and it's like, you're not connected to the internet, you can no longer read this book, I think you'd see a lot of complaints. But, that's just me shooting from the hip there, so I don't really know.
Yeah, I know that they're developing an always-on technology. Where you're going to see it, it's unknown. I mean, it may make sense to put it on cellular devices, like stuff that has a data connection that's not on Wi-Fi, because the very point of an e-reader is to take it on vacation where there's not a Wi-Fi area, or to take it to a beach, or to take it to your cabin, to get away from it all for the weekend. If you have an always on encryption method like that, it's going to really alienate the e-reader base, the people with dedicated e-readers that really there's very few but Amazon and maybe one or two others that actually have a data connection. And to have a data connection, it costs a lot more money, and a lot of people buy e-readers because they're cheap and cheerful. The always on data thing, I can see where they're coming from, because you could sort of eliminate almost the DRM by always sort of be pinging the service to make sure that you are reading a title that you claimed ownership of. But I could see that on a consumer level as being bulky, unwieldy, cumbersome, and just a kick in the pants.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how it's implemented, but there were a lot of things that I think consumers, if they were explained to them before they saw them, would have not really taken to. So we'll see how this works. But I think, as long as most consumers are still sort of not really aware of DRM, I think whatever they want to do will be fine. When consumers, are hampered by it, I think that's when they'll get upset.
Okay, before we start the show, you said that you wanted to talk about a Penguin departure.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting news. It's important news. So Molly Barton, the global digital director for Penguin, has left the company, is leaving the company. She helped launch Book Country. She was in charge of it. She was responsible for many Penguin initiatives. She was heavily involved in Bookish's launch.
That's the Facebook thing that they have, right? Isn't it?
No, Bookish, the retailer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Penguin and Simon & Schuster and Hachette were the three in a joint venture, and she was in charge of Penguin's part of Bookish. So she was a very important executive. She rose up the ranks very, very quickly. She went from assistant editor to global digital director in 7 years. She is very, very smart, and she's going on to be a faculty at Wesleyan University for at least a semester or two, and then also will be on the advisory board of several, New York and San Francisco-based publishing startups. And the reason I think it's interesting is because, this is what happens when two big companies merge: is who joins the senior executive team, who joins sort of the unit executive teams, and who leaves. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that, had the two companies not merged, Molly would probably still be there. The company told me that each of the divisions, the units, are now going to run all their own digital initiatives. They will not be replacing her. And Brandy Larson, who was brought in about a year ago to help with Book Country, will now be its director.
So we have a little bit of statistics about young children's media in educational use, and some of it has been declining sharply, according to a DBW article.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of stuff come out right now about what's happening in children's e-reading, and one of the things that we're learning is that as children get older, they spend more time with screens, but they also spend less time with educational content. So even though their content use on screens is going up, their educational content use goes down as they get older. And I think this represents a big opportunity for publishers. Parents make content purchasing decisions much based on the perceived educational value of the content. So for as children get older, I think there's a gap that publishers can fill for digital educational content. I mean, the screens is where the kids are, and the parents, ostensibly don't mind them being there, but I think the parents would be happier if they could buy their kids more educational content. So I think this finding is really represents an opportunity for smart and aggressive publishers.
So if they're not, as kids get older, the less educational content they're consuming, what are they doing? Do you know?
The study didn't go into that exactly what they're doing. But my guess is the same thing that they're watching movies, they're watching YouTube, they're watching TV shows, they're playing, they're engaging with apps, they're playing games, they're socializing with their friends. I mean, the same things that we all do on tablets.
Yeah. I we're at that level where tablets are coming down in price. It seems as though that every household now has one or is thinking about purchasing one. So these devices are in the house, and kids have their own. On average, it used to be like a household used to have one TV. And then there had two TVs, and now there's a TV in every room. It's almost
Mm.
becoming the same thing with like tablets now. Whereas the kids market, there's a lot of publishers betting big on both the kids reading market for digital, and the educational development market, trying to get it into schools, trying to appeal to kids. I know Barnes and Noble bet big on kids, like a kids ecosystem where they had the read and meet function, the read and record. Source Books does something like that. It seems as though a lot of people are betting big on kids content. Do you think that kids content is the next big boom?
I think it is. We have seen the proportion of kids e-reading in the U.S. increase markedly over the past couple of years. Right now, the proportion of kids aged 2 to 13 who are reading digitally in the U.S. is 67% as of late 2013. And I think that number is only going to go up. And we're looking at a generation raised on screens. And I think as that generation ages, as technology becomes cheaper, there'll be more raised on screens, and then and some time will pass, and people having kids in 5 or 10 years will be more comfortable with their kids consuming all of their media on screens. So I think book publishers have a tremendous amount of intellectual property. They know how to create and manage intellectual property, and the smart ones like Random House and Source Books and Scholastic and so many others are getting in on this and providing the content and the underpinnings for the content that the kids are going to be consuming this year, next year, and years from now.
Before we wrap up the show today, something actually was just brought to my attention about a site that probably you're not familiar with, and I wasn't familiar with until I got this story. But there's a new website / business in the UK called Look for Books. And their business model is inserting your book cover into billboards, subway advertisements, and even during an Amazon press conference. When Jeff Bezos was unveiling the Paperwhite 2, there was a book being displayed, and it was actually a book title from an indie author. Do you think that this is a viable business model? Because if you look at subways, most of the advertisements now are digital, so it's pretty easy to flip things in there. More billboards. You live in New York, Jeremy. Times Square, it's all digital. It's very easy to. I know with like Thomson routers and companies like that, you can actually pay them to put whatever you want. To advertise your business, to advertise the product launch. Do you think that a service that just specializes in promoting books or eBooks, do you think that's a viable business model?
Um, Yes, depending on the overhead. I think that services for authors and services that help publishers market their books it's a very fruitful place to be right now. And I see that kind of service is something that authors and publishers could both use. So yeah, I do think it's a viable business model, depending on overhead, because if there could be some technology that would help place book advertising in unused inventory at a very cheap rate, or at very highly targeted inventory at a reasonable rate, I think that publishers would use it, and I think it would all have to do with ROI. If they spend $1,000, are they going to get $2,000 back? And if the answer is yes, then I absolutely think it's a good place to be, and it sounds like a really interesting company.
Yeah, this is a company I think I'm going to try to approach for an interview and just see, what are they really into, because I've gotten about 3 different emails today on this company, and it looks very interesting. It's certainly, I know a lot of people in public transportation, like you ride the bus, most of the adverts are digital now. I know a lot of people, when I used to take like the tube, that a lot of people are reading on their phones, they're reading on their tablets, and if you could see like a book and it has a QR code, you can just like scan it and get the book listing, read a sample, you're pretty well good to go. So I don't know if it's all dependent on like pricing and availability. There's a lot of questions, but on a fundamental business level, I think it's very interesting. So we'll check that out. So before we wrap the show up today, Jeremy, do you have any final thoughts on anything that's happened in the last few weeks?
I would love to see people come and attend some free Digital Book World webcasts we have coming up. One is coming up in just a couple of weeks, and it's going to discuss the results of our latest author report. I just spent an hour on the phone today with the author of the report, Dana Beth Weinberg, who is fantastic at Digital Book World, and we planned out what we're going to be saying on this webcast. It's on Thursday, February 6th at noon, and it's free. And anyone who's interested in what's happening with authors right now and what authors want and why and what publishers should do about it should definitely attend this webcast. So that's all.
So where could they go to find out more?
They can go to digitalbookworld.com, and at the very top it says webcast. You just click on that. Or on the right-hand side, on the right-hand side we're advertising a different upcoming webcast. But the one that I'm talking about is a free one at the top of the webcast page on digitalbookworld.com.
Okay, everybody check that out. And of course, thanks for joining me today, Jeremy. And we'll talk to you again next Monday.
Awesome.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. And you've been listening to the Good Reader Radio Show. Everybody take care.